Nobody tells you about this part. They tell you about the sleepless nights and the first steps and the school plays and the teenage arguments and the letting go when they leave for college. They tell you that motherhood is the hardest and the most rewarding thing you will ever do. They tell you that your heart will walk around outside your body for the rest of your life the moment that child is placed in your arms. What nobody tells you is that sometimes, not always, but sometimes, the person that heart belongs to will make a choice. A clear, deliberate, eyes-open choice. And in that choice, you will find yourself on the wrong side of a door you spent 30 years helping him build. My name is Margaret. I am 64 years old. I live alone in the same house in Columbus, Ohio, that I moved into when my son Daniel was 7 years old, and the world was a set of possibilities I was still too young and too busy to fully appreciate. Daniel is 37 now. He lives 40 minutes away. He has a wife named Vanessa and 2 children, my grandchildren, Lily and Owen, who are 6 and 4 and who have their father's eyes and their grandmother's stubbornness, which they have had no opportunity to learn from me directly, because I see them perhaps 4 times a year. 4 times. I want to tell you how we got here. I want to tell you about the love that went into raising him and the years that came after, and the morning he stood in my living room and said words that I have never been able to fully unknow. And I want to tell you about what happened after. Well, because this story, unlike many stories, it does not end in the dark, but it takes a long time to reach the light Daniel's father left when Daniel was 3. Not dramatically, not with a fight or an ultimatum. He simply drifted. The way some people do when they realize that the life they have committed to is harder and less glamorous than the life they imagined, and the exit seems easier than the staying. He moved to another state. He sent money intermittently, for a few years, and then less intermittently, and then not at all. He remarried. He had other children. Daniel asked about him when he was old enough to ask. I told the truth in the way you tell difficult truths to children. Not all of it at once, not in a way that made the truth a burden he had to carry, but honestly and gently and without bitterness. Well, I had made a decision very early in Daniel's life that I was not going to poison his image of his father, because that image, whatever it became, was his to form, not mine to form for him. I worked 2 jobs for most of Daniel's childhood, days at the school district's administrative office and 3 evenings a week cleaning offices downtown. I am not telling you this for sympathy. I am telling you because I want you to understand the texture of those years, the particular quality of a life that is entirely structured around a child, the way you stop thinking of your own needs as primary and start thinking of them as secondary and then tertiary and then as things you will get to eventually in some future version of life that never quite arrives. But they were good years. I want to say that clearly and mean it. Daniel was a joy. He's not a perfect child, no child is, but a genuinely good one. He was kind in the way that children are kind when kindness has been modeled for them consistently. He was curious and funny, and he had a habit of bringing home injured birds and insects that he was convinced he could nurse back to health. A conviction I supported, even though the outcomes were not always successful. He did well in school. He went to Ohio State on a partial scholarship, and I covered the rest by refinancing the house, a decision I made without hesitation and have never regretted for a single day. He graduated with an engineering degree and a group of friends and the quiet confidence of a young man who knew that the person behind him had never wavered. I was at every graduation, every ceremony, every moment he would let me attend. Yes, I was the proudest person in every room. And then at 30, he brought Vanessa home for Thanksgiving. And everything I had built my life around began, slowly and without my consent, to change. I am going to be very careful here, because it would be easy, and it would be the less honest version of this story, to paint Vanessa as a villain, to make her the cause of everything that followed in the way of a simple narrative that locates all the difficulty in one person and thereby makes everything else uncomplicated. The truth is that I do not know Vanessa well enough to call her a villain. I never got close enough to her to know her fully. And that distance, that never quite breached gap between us, is a truth that belongs to both of us, not only to her. What I can tell you is what I observed. Vanessa was, from the first Thanksgiving, a woman who had very clear ideas about how things should be done and an equally clear expectation that those ideas would prevail. Not through aggression, through a kind of quiet, confident assumption that was so complete and so consistent that it rarely needed to be stated explicitly. She simply proceeded as though her version of events was the correct one, and the world for the most part arranged itself accordingly. She was successful, a project manager at a tech firm, organized and capable in the ways that the professional world rewards. She was attractive. She was, in social settings, charming in the effortful way of someone who has decided that charm is a tool rather than a quality. She loved Daniel, I believe that. But love, as I have observed it in many forms across 64 years, can coexist with a great deal of behavior that is not loving. A person can genuinely love someone and still, in the construction of their shared life, build walls that keep certain other people out. The walls Vanessa built did not have my name on them. They were not labeled. They were simply there, in the rescheduled visits and the holidays that acquired new traditions that didn't include mine, and the way Daniel's phone calls, which had always been frequent and easy, became shorter, and then less frequent, and then something he seemed to make from a particular careful place that did not feel entirely like him. I tried to build a relationship with her. I want you to know that. I invited her to things. I complimented her genuinely and often. I did not give opinions about their home or their parenting or any of the territories that mothers-in-law are warned away from, and rightly so. I tried to be available without being present, warm without being intrusive, interested without being demanding. None of it built what I was hoping to build. The distance remained, and slowly, over 4 years of marriage, it grew. Daniel came to my house on a Saturday morning in April, alone, which was unusual. Visits had become family visits, the 4 of them together, and Daniel and I had not been alone in a room together for months. Long enough that I noticed it immediately when he arrived without Vanessa and without the children. He sat across from me at the kitchen table. He had my father's way of sitting when something was difficult. Very upright, very still, the posture of a man who has decided to do something hard and is holding himself in position for it. I made coffee. I put it in front of him. I sat down and I waited. He said, "Mom, I need to talk to you about something and I need you to hear me out before you respond." I told him to go ahead. What he told me in the next 20 minutes was that Vanessa felt that our relationship, mine and Daniel's, was too close. That she felt, in her own words, which he was relaying to me carefully and without editorial, that I was too present in their lives, and that the dynamic was making it difficult for her to feel that their marriage was truly their own, that she had asked him to create more distance, and that he, after what he described as a great deal of conversation and a great deal of reflection, had decided that she was right. That he said, "I love you. That is not what this is about. But I need to be a husband first. And I need you to understand that." Pause. 6 seconds. I sat with that sentence for a long time. I'm going to tell you what I felt honestly and completely, because I think it matters that you know. I felt, first, a pain that I have no adequate word for. Not anger, not betrayal in the clean sense, something older and more complete than either of those things. The particular grief of a parent who has given everything and is being told by the person they gave it to that the giving itself was the problem. I felt that for a long time. And then underneath it, I felt something else. I felt, and I am ashamed of this, though I have made my peace with it since, a furious or burning recognition that I had seen this coming for 2 years and had been telling myself I was imagining it. And then underneath even that, I felt something quiet. I felt clear. Because Daniel, in saying what he had come to say, had done me a strange and painful courtesy. He had told me the truth, and the truth, even when it costs everything, is always better than the careful management of a lie. I did not cry in front of him. I want to say that clearly, not as a point of pride, but as a description of what actually happened. I sat across from my son at my kitchen table, and I held his words in my hands, in a manner of speaking, and I looked at them clearly, and I did not perform either collapse or composure. I simply was. I told him that I heard him. I told him that I loved him, and that nothing would ever change that. I told him that I respected his marriage and his wife, and that I had never intended to make either of them feel crowded or encroached upon, and that if I had done so without realizing it, I was genuinely sorry for that. And then I told him one other thing. I said, I need you to know something, Daniel. I raised you alone. I worked 2 jobs, and I refinanced this house, and I did every single thing alone, from the time you were 3 years old, because I loved you and because that was what was needed. I never asked you to carry any of that. I never used it as currency. I never made you feel that your happiness was conditional on what you gave me back. I paused. And I'm not using it now. I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty. I'm telling you because I need you to understand that what you're asking me to do, to make myself smaller, to be less present, to visit 4 times a year and pretend that is enough, I will do it. Because you are my son and I will do what you need me to do. But I need you to know that I know what it costs, and I need you to know it too. He was quiet for a long time after that. Then he said, I know, Mom. 2 words. I have thought about those 2 words for 2 years. Whether they meant what I needed them to mean, whether knowing is enough without changing, whether a son who knows the cost and pays it anyway, who chooses to pay it anyway, is still, in some essential way, the boy I raised. I do not have a clean answer to that. He hugged me before he left. A long hug, the kind he hadn't given me since he was a teenager. I held on for longer than I probably should have, and then I let go, and I closed the door behind him, and I went to the kitchen, and I sat down on the floor, and I cried for an hour. The year that followed was the strangest year of my life since the year Daniel's father left. In both cases, I was forced to rebuild around an absence. In both cases, the absence was not of my choosing. And in both cases, I discovered, slowly, reluctantly, with much more grief than I would have liked, that there was a person inside me who had been waiting a long time to be attended to. I had been Margaret Daniel's mother for so long that I had almost entirely lost track of who Margaret was on her own. So I found out. I signed up for a ceramics class that I had been mentioning for 15 years and never getting around to. Tuesday evenings, at a small studio in the Arts District, a group of 6 people of various ages, none of whom knew me as anyone's mother. I was simply Margaret, a woman who was learning to center clay and finding it unexpectedly meditative and occasionally hilarious when the bowl collapsed for the 4th time. I started walking, every morning 30 minutes through the neighborhood I had lived in for 27 years. I stopped at a coffee shop I had never been inside, despite passing it twice a day. I talked to the owner, a man named Frank, who had the kind of laugh that starts somewhere near the floor. I became a regular. I had a regular order. These small things, the specific table by the window, the coffee that Frank knew to start when he saw me coming, felt, in that year, like extraordinarily important anchors. I made a friend. Her name was Carol. And a woman I met in the ceramics class who was 61 and recently retired and had the quality I have come to most value in people. The ability to be fully present in a conversation without needing to steer it anywhere. We had dinner sometimes, we walked together on weekends. She knew about Daniel. She never told me what to do about it. She simply listened and occasionally said true things in a way that did not require me to respond defensively. I saw Daniel and the family 4 times that year. Each time I was warm. I was present with the grandchildren in the way that grandmothers are present when they understand that time is limited and must be used well. I did not show Daniel my grief, not because I was hiding it, he knew, but because performing it in front of him would not have helped either of us. I was building, in that year, something I had not had in a very long time, a life that was mine, not Daniel's mother's life, not a life structured entirely around someone else's needs and schedule and comfort. Mine. And it turned out, as I think some part of me had always suspected but never quite had the space to confirm, that it was a good life, a genuinely, surprisingly good life. I told you this story does not end in the dark. Here is where the light comes from. 18 months after that Saturday morning, 18 months of 4 visits a year and shorter calls and a distance that I had accepted and was learning to live within, Daniel called me on a Wednesday night. Not a scheduled call, not a birthday, just a Wednesday. He asked if he could come over. He arrived an hour later. He sat at the same kitchen table. But he looked like a man who had been carrying something for a long time and had decided at last to put it down. He told me that Vanessa and he had been in couples therapy for 6 months, that the therapy had opened conversations that had not been opened before, that one of those conversations had been about me, about the distance that had been created and what it had meant and what it was actually about. He said, the therapist asked Vanessa why it mattered so much, how much you were present. And she talked for a long time, and at the end she said,